The quiet human she married suddenly wielded a sword and altered everything. Part 1. The diplomatic reception hall of Sanctuary Prime was filled with the most important people in society. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling and cast soft blue light across the polished floors. Hundreds of guests moved through the space in elegant robes of silver and purple. Their silver-blue skin glowed under the lights, and their four eyes watched everything with careful attention. Stood near the center of the room. She was tall and graceful, with the bearing of someone born into nobility. Her family had served the High Council for 12 generations. She had earned her own reputation as a skilled diplomat who could end conflicts with words instead of weapons. Tonight she wore the formal robes of her house, and a thin golden chain around her neck marked her status as a married woman. Her husband stood in the corner of the room. Daniel Price was not tall. He was not impressive to look at. He had brown hair that was slightly messy and brown eyes that seemed to notice everything while drawing attention to nothing. He wore the simple gray uniform of a translator, and he held a data tablet in his hands as he reviewed documents for tomorrow's meetings. Two nobles walked past him without a second glance. "I still cannot understand why she chose that creature," one of them said to the other. "He is so plain, so quiet. What could she possibly see in him?" "Humans are strange," the other replied. "Perhaps she finds his weakness amusing." Daniel heard every word. He always did, but he simply continued reading his documents as if nothing had happened. His face showed no emotion at all. Across the room, his childhood friend approached her with a glass of wine. "Your husband looks lonely over there," said. There was something unkind in her voice. "He prefers to work," replied calmly. "He says these events make him uncomfortable." Most humans would be uncomfortable surrounded by their superiors. Turned to face her friend directly. All four of her eyes focused on with sudden intensity. "You misunderstand him," said. "You all do. Humans possess a kind of strength that cannot see because we do not know how to look for it." "What strength? He cannot run as fast as us. He cannot fight as well as us. He does not live as long as us. What exactly makes him strong?" Smiled softly. "When my ship broke down on the human colony world 3 years ago, I was stranded and afraid. I did not speak their language. I did not understand their customs. I was alone." "And he helped you?" "He did more than help me. He spent 3 weeks teaching me about his world. He was patient when I made mistakes. He was kind when others were not. He gave me his food when supplies were short, and he slept on the floor so I could have his bed. He asked for nothing in return." Looked unconvinced. "That sounds like weakness to me, or would have demanded something." "That is exactly my point," said. "He did not need to demand anything. He was strong enough to give without expecting anything back. That is a kind of strength your four eyes have never learned to see." The conversation ended when the great doors of the reception hall suddenly opened. A tall figure walked through them. He wore the black and gold armor of the military, and medals covered his chest. His silver-blue skin was marked with battle scars, and his four eyes burned with pride and confidence. Commander had returned from the border wars. The crowd parted before him like water. Whispers spread through the room as people recognized the famous warrior. He had defeated enemies of the people on a dozen different worlds. He was considered one of the finest soldiers of his generation. He was also the man had been promised to before she met Daniel. Walked directly toward. His eyes found her immediately, as if no one else in the room existed. Then his gaze moved to the corner where Daniel stood quietly with his data tablet. Something dark passed across his face. He said, his voice was deep and commanding, "You look well." "Commander," replied formally, "welcome back to Sanctuary Prime. I hope your campaigns were successful." "They were. I have brought honor to our people through victory in battle." He paused and looked at Daniel again. "I see you have been busy as well, making different choices." "I made the choice that was right for me." Did you? Took a step closer. I remember when we were young. You told me you would marry the strongest warrior in the fleet. Instead, you married a human translator who hides in corners. I was young and foolish then. I have learned that strength takes many forms. Has it? His voice grew louder and nearby guests turned to listen. Because I see only one form of strength that matters, the kind that protects our people, the kind that wins wars, the kind that your husband clearly lacks. Daniel finally looked up from his tablet. His brown eyes met four eyes across the crowded room. He said nothing. His face remained perfectly calm. Look at him, said to the crowd. He does not even defend himself. He does not even speak. Is this the creature who claims to deserve a daughter of house? Stepped forward with anger in her eyes. That is enough, Commander. You forget yourself. No, I remember myself perfectly, and I remember the old laws, smiled coldly. The laws that say a former betrothed may challenge an unworthy spouse. The laws that have existed since our ancestors first reached the stars. A gasp went through the crowd. You would not dare, said. I would, I will. This human is not worthy of you, and I intend to prove it. Turned and walked toward the doors. Before he left, he looked back one more time at Daniel. Prepare yourself, human. Tomorrow I will show everyone what you truly are. Then he was gone. The reception hall erupted in whispers and shocked conversation, rushed to Daniel's side. Her hands were shaking with anger and fear. Daniel, we need to leave. We need to run. I will not let him hurt you. Daniel set down his data tablet. He took her hands in his and looked into her eyes with a gentleness that made her heart ache. It will be all right, he said quietly. How can you say that? He will kill you. You do not know how to fight. Daniel did not answer, but noticed something she had never seen before. His hands had gone very still, completely still, like the calm surface of water before a storm. And somewhere deep in his brown eyes, something ancient and dangerous had begun to wake up. The quiet human she married suddenly wielded a sword and altered everything. Part 2. The council chambers of Sanctuary Prime were ancient and imposing. Great stone pillars rose toward a ceiling painted with images of history. Hundreds of council members sat in curved rows that surrounded a central floor where speakers could address the assembly. Today that floor belonged to Commander. I invoke the right of reclamation, declared. His voice echoed through the silent chamber. Under the laws of our ancestors, I challenge the human known as Daniel Price. I declare him unworthy of marriage to daughter of house, and I demand the right to prove this through single combat. High Counselor sat in the highest seat of the chamber. She was mother, and her face was carved from stone as she listened to the challenge. She had opposed the marriage from the beginning. She had warned her daughter that humans were beneath them, but she had never wanted this. The right of reclamation has not been invoked in over 200 years, said slowly. Many believe it to be outdated and barbaric. Many believe wrong, replied. The law remains. It was never removed from our codes. It exists precisely for situations like this, when unworthy individuals attempt to join noble houses through marriage. Stood from her seat in the family section. Her voice rang out across the chamber. This is madness. The law was created to settle disputes between warriors. It was never meant to apply to other species. My husband is a translator, not a soldier. There is no honor in this challenge. Then he may refuse, said with a cruel smile, and your marriage will be dissolved as the law demands. Either he fights me or he admits he is unworthy. Those are his only choices. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some council members supported in the old traditions. Others called the challenge shameful and unfair, raised her hand for silence. The law is clear, she said finally. Her voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. If the challenged party refuses to fight, the marriage is considered void. If he accepts and loses, the marriage is also void. Only victory can preserve the Union. Then I accept. Every head in the chamber turned toward the quiet voice. Daniel Price stood in the visitors section. He wore the same simple gray uniform he always wore. His face showed no fear, no anger, no emotion at all. "I accept the challenge," he said again. "I will fight, Commander." Silence filled the chamber. Then laughter began to spread through the council seats. A human challenging a decorated warrior was absurd. It was suicide. It was a joke. Only a few people were not laughing, stared at her husband with horror and confusion, studied him with sudden curiosity, and narrowed his 4 eyes with something that was not quite amusement. "Very well," declared. "The challenge is accepted. The duel will take place tomorrow at sunset in the ceremonial arena. May the ancestors guide both combatants." The council session ended, pushed through the crowd to reach Daniel's side. She grabbed his arm and pulled him out of the chamber, through the corridors, and into their private quarters. Only when the door closed behind them did she finally speak. "Have you lost your mind?" Daniel walked to the window and looked out at the stars. "I had to accept." "No, you did not. We could have run. We could have left this station and found somewhere else to live. I would have given up everything for you." "I know." Daniel turned to face her. "That is exactly why I could not refuse. You would have sacrificed your family, your title, your entire identity. I could not let you do that. So instead you will die." Tears formed in his 4 eyes. "Daniel has killed dozens of enemies in combat. He is faster than you. He is stronger than you. He has trained his entire life for moments like this." "I know what he is." "Then how can you possibly hope to win?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to a storage cabinet in the corner of the room. It was locked with a security code that had never seen him use. He entered the code, and the cabinet door slid open. Inside was a sealed metal case covered in dust. "What is that?" asked. "Something I hoped I would never need again." Daniel lifted the case and carried it to the table. His hands moved slowly, carefully, as if the case contained something precious and dangerous. He opened it. Inside lay a folded uniform of dark blue fabric. Military medals rested on top of it, their surfaces still bright after years of storage. And beneath the uniform lay a curved blade in a leather sheath. The handle was wrapped in worn leather, and strange symbols were carved into the guard. Recognized the symbols. They were Terran military insignia. "Daniel," she whispered, "what is this? Who are you?" He lifted the blade from the case. When he drew it from the sheath, the metal caught the light and gleamed like captured starlight. "My father died in the Terran border conflicts," Daniel said quietly. "He was a soldier. My mother raised me alone after that. She taught me everything about alien cultures. She wanted me to build bridges instead of burning them. But first she made sure I could protect myself. And then the war came to our colony when I was 19 years old." He looked at the blade in his hands. His eyes were no longer soft. They were hard and focused and filled with memories he had tried to bury. "I did things during the war, things I am not proud of, things that gave me nightmares for years. When it was over, I ran away from that life. I changed my records. I became a translator. I tried to be the person my mother always wanted me to be." "Why did you never tell me?" "Because I did not want to be that person anymore." He finally met her eyes. "I wanted to be the man you fell in love with, the quiet one, the kind one, the one who helps people with words instead of weapons." Crossed the room and took his face in her hands. Her 4 eyes searched his 2 eyes for the truth. "I fell in love with you," she said. "All of you, even the parts you hide. You may not say that after tomorrow." "I will always say that." She kissed him gently. "Now tell me the truth. Can you win?" Daniel looked at the blade one more time. Something changed in his posture. His shoulders straightened. His chin lifted. The quiet translator disappeared and someone else took his place. Someone dangerous. Yes, he said, I can win. The quiet human she married suddenly wielded a sword and altered everything. Part 3. The training hall of Sanctuary Prime was a vast space where warriors practiced their combat skills. In the early morning hours, it was usually filled with soldiers and nobles working to maintain their strength and speed. Practice weapons clashed against each other, and instructors shouted corrections to their students. When Daniel Price walked through the doors, everyone stopped. He wore simple training clothes instead of his translator uniform. He carried his curved blade in one hand, still in its leather sheath. His face was calm and focused as he walked to an empty section of the floor. Whispers spread through the room. That is the human who accepted the challenge. He must be insane. This will be amusing to watch. Daniel ignored them all. He set down a small bag and removed his outer shirt. The whispers died instantly. His body was covered in scars. Long, thin lines crossed his chest and back. Burn marks showed on his left shoulder. His muscles were lean but defined, built for speed and precision rather than raw power. This was not the body of a translator who spent his days reading documents. This was the body of a warrior who had survived many battles. Daniel drew his blade from its sheath. The metal sang softly as it cleared the leather. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Then he began to move. His feet glided across the floor in patterns that seemed almost like a dance. The blade moved with him, cutting through the air in smooth arcs. Each movement flowed into the next without pause or hesitation. There was no wasted motion. Every step and every strike had purpose. The in the training hall stood frozen. They had never seen a human move like this. Daniel's eyes remained closed as he practiced. His mind drifted back to another time and another place. He remembered the training camps on Earth where human soldiers learned to fight against species that were faster and stronger than them. He remembered the instructors who taught that speed and precision could overcome raw power. He remembered the countless hours of practice that turned his body into a weapon. And he remembered the war. Morrow Station had been a small outpost on the edge of human territory. When enemy forces attacked, the regular military could not arrive in time to help. Only a handful of Frontier Guard soldiers stood between the civilian population and destruction. Daniel was 22 years old. He had been a soldier for 3 years. The battle lasted for 9 days. Daniel's unit held the main corridor against wave after wave of attackers. They were outnumbered 10 to 1. They had limited ammunition and no reinforcements coming. On the 5th day, their guns ran out of power. They fought with blades and fists and anything else they could find. Daniel killed 17 enemies during those 9 days. He earned his scars there. He earned his nightmares there. And he earned a name that he had tried very hard to forget. The Silent Blade. His commanding officer gave him that name after the battle. Daniel never spoke during combat. He never shouted or cursed or made any sound at all. He simply moved through the enemy like a ghost, leaving death in his wake. When the reinforcements finally arrived, only 4 soldiers from his unit were still alive. Daniel carried the body of his best friend to the medical ship. He did not speak for 3 weeks after that. The war ended 6 months later. Daniel resigned from the military immediately. He changed his name in official records. He became a translator and promised himself he would never fight again. But the skills remained. The muscle memory remained. The silent killer inside him remained, sleeping but never truly gone. Now that killer was waking up. Daniel opened his eyes and completed his practice routine. His breathing was steady and controlled. Sweat covered his skin, but his hands were perfectly still. A young trainee stood nearby with his mouth open in shock. He had watched the entire performance without blinking. "How is that possible?" the young one whispered. "You are human." Daniel sheathed his blade. Humans are full of surprises. The trainee ran out of the hall. Daniel knew he would spread the news to everyone he could find. By midday, the entire station would know that the quiet human translator was not what he seemed. He turned toward the door and saw standing there. She had watched everything. Her 4 eyes were wide with emotion, but not fear, not disgust, not disappointment. She looked at him with something that might have been wonder. "That was you," she said softly, "the real you." "Part of me." Daniel walked toward her. "The part I tried to leave behind." "Why did you hide it?" "Because I was ashamed." He stopped in front of her and looked into her eyes. "I killed people. I was good at it, too good, and I hated myself for being good at it." "You were a soldier protecting innocent people. There is no shame in that." "Is there not? I remember every face, every life I ended. They visit me in my dreams." Took his hands in hers. "Then let me help you carry that weight. You do not have to bear it alone anymore." For the first time in many years, Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. The guilt and shame that he had carried for so long did not disappear, but they felt lighter somehow, easier to hold. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank me by winning tomorrow," squeezed his hands. "And then we can talk about all the other secrets you have been keeping." Daniel almost smiled. "There are not many more." "We will see about that." They left the training hall together. Behind them, the warriors began to whisper again, but this time the whispers were different. This time they were filled with respect. Commander received the news in his private quarters that afternoon. His aide described what witnesses had seen in the training hall: the human speed, his precision, his deadly grace. Listened in silence. When the aide finished, he dismissed him with a wave. Alone in his room, walked to the window and stared out at the stars. His hands curled into fists at his sides. He had expected an easy victory. He had expected to humiliate the human in front of the entire station and reclaim as his bride. He had expected to remind everyone why they were superior to all other species. Now he was not sure what to expect. But one thing remained certain. Tomorrow he would fight. Tomorrow one of them would fall. And had never lost a battle in his life. He did not intend to start now. The quiet human she married suddenly wielded a sword and altered everything. Part 4. The ceremonial arena of Sanctuary Prime had not been this full in over a century. Thousands have packed the stone seats that rose in circles around the combat floor. More watched through screens throughout the station. Word of the duel had spread across the sector, and everyone wanted to see what would happen when a decorated commander faced a mysterious human. The arena floor was made of polished black stone. Ancient symbols were carved into its surface, marking this as a sacred place where disputes had been settled since the earliest days of civilization. Torches burned along the walls even though the station had modern lighting. Tradition demanded fire for a right of reclamation. High Counselor sat in the highest seat overlooking the arena. Her face revealed nothing of her thoughts. She had not spoken to her daughter since the council session. She did not know what to hope for. Sat in the family section with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She had not slept the night before. She had spent the hours before dawn watching Daniel prepare his blade and his mind for what was coming. He had seemed calm, almost peaceful. That frightened her more than anything. A horn sounded across the arena. Commander entered from the eastern gate. He wore his ceremonial armor of black and gold. It was lighter than battle armor, designed for movement rather than protection. His blade was strapped across his back, and his 4 eyes burned with confidence as he walked to the center of the floor. The crowd erupted in cheers. Was their hero, their champion. He raised one fist to acknowledge their support, and the cheers grew even louder. Then the western gate opened. Daniel Price walked onto the arena floor wearing simple dark clothing. No armor, no helmet, no protection of any kind. He carried his curved blade in his right hand, already drawn from its sheath. His brown eyes swept across the crowd without interest before settling on his opponent. The cheering died down. Confused murmurs replaced it. The human looked so small compared to the armored warrior, so fragile, so doomed. A master of ceremonies stepped forward and raised his hands for silence. Citizens of the people, we gather to witness a rite of reclamation. Commander has challenged Daniel Price for the right to claim as his bride. The rules are ancient and simple. The duel continues until one combatant yields, is unable to continue, or dies. No weapons are forbidden. No techniques are restricted. May the ancestors judge the worthy. He stepped back and raised a ceremonial flag. Begin. The flag dropped. Moved first. He was incredibly fast for someone wearing armor. His blade came off his back and into his hands in a single smooth motion. He charged across the floor with the speed of a predator, his weapon raised for a devastating opening strike. Daniel did not move. At the last possible moment, he shifted his weight and let the blade pass within inches of his face, spun and attacked again, and again, and again. Each time, Daniel moved just enough to avoid being hit. He did not counterattack. He did not retreat. He simply flowed around each strike like water flowing around stones. The crowd watched in stunned silence. This was not what they expected. The human should have been dead in the first seconds. Instead, he was making their champion look clumsy. Growled in frustration and increased his speed. His attacks became faster and more powerful. Sparks flew from the stone floor where his blade struck instead of flesh. Sweat began to form on his silver-blue skin despite the cool air of the arena. Daniel continued to move without attacking. His breathing remained steady. His face remained calm. "Fight me, coward," snarled. "Stop running and face me like a warrior." Daniel said nothing. He simply waited for the next attack and slipped past it. This continued for several minutes. The crowd began to grow restless. Some called for Daniel to attack. Others accused him of cowardice. A few started to understand what they were watching. The human was studying his opponent. Every attack taught Daniel something new. The way shifted his weight before a thrust, the slight pause before his strongest strikes, the pattern of his footwork, the limits of his speed. Realized it first. She had seen Daniel read documents and languages and people for 3 years. Now he was reading his opponent the same way, learning him, understanding him, preparing to destroy him. Launched his most powerful attack yet. He put all his strength and speed into a diagonal slash that would have cut a normal opponent in half. Daniel moved. He stepped inside the arc of the blade, too close to adjust. His curved sword flicked upward in a motion almost too fast to see. It struck the handle of his weapon and twisted. The blade flew from his hands and clattered across the stone floor. Before could react, Daniel moved again. 3 precise strikes hit the joints of his armor. The chest plate fell away. The arm guards dropped, stumbled backward and fell to his knees, suddenly exposed and defenseless. Daniel stood over him, with the curved blade resting against his throat. The arena was completely silent. No one moved, no one breathed. Gripped the edge of her seat so hard that her fingers ached. Her mother leaned forward with wide eyes. Every person in the arena waited to see what would happen next. Looked up at Daniel with 4 eyes full of shock and disbelief. He had trained his entire life. He had won countless battles. He had never been defeated so completely, so easily. "Do it," said through clenched teeth. "Finish it. Prove you are a killer like everyone says." Daniel looked down at him. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackling of the torches. Then Daniel lowered his blade. He stepped back and extended his empty hand toward his fallen opponent. "No," Daniel said. His voice was quiet, but somehow it reached every corner of the silent arena. "I did not come here to kill you. I came here to prove something." "What could you possibly prove by sparing me?" That strength is not measured by how many enemies you defeat. Daniel kept his hand extended. It is measured by how many enemies you choose not to destroy when you have the power to do so. Stared at the offered hand. His face showed confusion and anger and something else, something that might have been shame. "Take my hand," Daniel said. "This duel is over. There is no need for more blood." The crowd began to murmur. Some demanded that Daniel finish the fight properly. Others watched with growing understanding. This human had won the battle twice, once with skill, once with mercy. Remained on his knees. His four eyes studied the strange creature who had defeated him. The quiet human who wielded a blade like a master and spoke like a philosopher. Slowly, very slowly, reached up and took Daniel's hand. Daniel pulled him to his feet. The arena exploded into chaos. Some cheered, some protested, some simply sat in stunned silence trying to understand what they had just witnessed. But in the family section was smiling through her tears. She finally understood what she had always sensed in her quiet husband. He was the most dangerous man in the arena, and he had chosen peace. The quiet human she married suddenly wielded a sword and altered everything. Part 5. The council chambers erupted into argument as soon as the duel ended. Council members shouted at each other across the ancient room. Some demanded that Daniel be forced to complete the fight according to tradition. Others argued that his victory was clear and undeniable. A few simply sat in their seats and stared at nothing, trying to process what they had witnessed. High Counselor watched the chaos from her elevated seat. Her face remained calm, but her mind was racing. She had opposed her daughter's marriage from the beginning. She had believed that humans were weak and unworthy of joining noble families. She had been wrong. Raised her hand for silence. It took several moments for the chamber to quiet down, but eventually all eyes turned to her. "The right of reclamation is complete," she declared. "Daniel Price has emerged victorious. His marriage to my daughter remains valid under the laws of our people." "He did not finish the fight," someone shouted from the council seats. "He showed weakness." "No," his voice cut through the noise like a blade. "He showed something we have forgotten." The chamber fell silent. The High Counselor rarely spoke with such intensity. "Our ancestors created the right of reclamation to determine worth," continued. "They believed that combat revealed the true nature of a person. Today we learned that they were correct, but not in the way we expected." She stood from her seat and looked down at the assembled council. Daniel Price could have killed Commander. He had the skill. He had the opportunity. He had the right under our own laws. Instead, he chose mercy. He chose to spare a man who had insulted him, threatened his marriage, and tried to take everything he loved. Her four eyes swept across the chamber. "That is not weakness. That is a strength our people have lost. The strength to show restraint. The strength to choose peace when violence would be easier. The strength to see value in an enemy's life even when that enemy sees no value in yours." Down in the arena, still stood where Daniel had helped him to his feet. The crowd had mostly departed, but he remained frozen in place. His blade lay on the ground nearby, but he made no move to retrieve it. Daniel waited patiently beside him. He had sheathed his own weapon and returned to looking like the quiet translator everyone had dismissed for years. "Why?" finally asked. His voice was hoarse. "Why did you spare me?" "Because killing you would not have proven anything worth proving. You could have ended me. You could have taken revenge for every insult I gave you, every time I called you weak, every time I mocked your humanity." Daniel nodded. "I could have. But then I would have become the monster you accused me of not being. I would have proven that humans are just as brutal as every other species in the galaxy." "Are you not?" "Some of us are. I was once." Daniel looked down at his hands. "During the war, I killed many people. I was efficient at it, cold, mechanical. I told myself it was necessary, and maybe it was, but I lost something in those years. something I have spent the rest of my life trying to find again. What? My humanity, Daniel met's eyes. The part of me that values life over death, peace over war, mercy over revenge. That is what makes humans different, not our strength or our speed or our technology. Our ability to choose who we want to be, even when everything around us pushes toward violence. Was quiet for a long moment. Then he slowly bent down and retrieved his blade. Daniel did not move or show any sign of fear. Instead of attacking, performed a gesture that Daniel did not recognize. He placed his blade against his own shoulder and bowed his head. This is the sign of respect between warriors, explained. It is given only to those who have proven themselves worthy. I have never given it to anyone outside our species. He raised his head and looked at Daniel with different eyes. The contempt was gone. In its place was something that resembled admiration. You are worthy, Daniel Price, more worthy than I knew. Before Daniel could respond, came running down from the stands. She threw her arms around her husband and held him tight. Tears streamed down her face, but she was laughing at the same time. You did it, she whispered. You wonderful, impossible, secretive man, you did it. I told you it would be all right. Never scare me like that again. Daniel wrapped his arms around her and smiled. I will try my best. Over the following days, news of the duel spread across space. Stories traveled from station to station, world to world. A human had defeated one of the greatest warriors in single combat, and then he had shown mercy. The implications rippled through galactic society. Humans had always been dismissed as physically inferior to most other species. They were considered useful for trade and translation, but not much else. Now people began to wonder what else they had missed about these strange creatures from the small blue world called Earth. Diplomatic requests arrived at Sanctuary Prime from a dozen different governments. Everyone wanted to meet the human who had changed their understanding of what humanity could be. Everyone wanted to understand the quiet strength that had described. Daniel declined most of the invitations. He returned to his work as a translator. He continued to avoid attention and live a quiet life with his wife. But some things had changed. When nobles passed him in the corridors, they nodded with respect instead of ignoring him. When visitors came to the station, they asked to meet the famous human who could have killed but chose not to. When young people heard his story, they began to question whether physical power was the only kind of strength that mattered. One evening, Daniel and stood together on the observation deck overlooking the planet below. The stars stretched endlessly above them, and the station hummed quietly around them. Do you ever regret it? Asked, leaving your life as a soldier behind. Never, not for a moment. But you could have been famous. You could have been a hero. I never wanted to be a hero. I only wanted to find peace. Daniel took her hand in his. I found it with you. What about your blade? Will you ever use it again? Daniel considered the question. His curved sword rested in its case back in their quarters, cleaned and stored but not forgotten. I hope not, he said finally, but I will always be ready to protect what I love. That is something the war taught me that I do not regret. Some things are worth fighting for. Like us. Like us. Leaned against his shoulder and watched the stars with him. The galaxy was vast and full of conflict. Wars continued on distant borders. Species still distrusted and feared each other. The problems of the universe had not been solved by one duel on one station. But something had shifted. A small crack had appeared in the walls that divided different peoples. A quiet human had shown that strength could take many forms, and that mercy was not the same as weakness. Daniel Price remained a translator. He remained quiet and kind and patient. He preferred books to battles and conversations to conflicts. But the galaxy now knew what his wife had always understood. The quiet ones were often the most dangerous, not because of what they would do when pushed to the edge, but because of what they chose not to do when they had the power to destroy. That was what humans were. That was what made them different. That was why a noble had fallen in love with a quiet translator and never once regretted her choice. And somewhere in the endless stars, other humans went about their lives without knowing that one of their own had changed everything. They worked and loved and struggled and dreamed, carrying within them the same quiet strength that Daniel had shown. The strength to be more than they had to be. The strength to choose kindness over cruelty. The strength to build bridges instead of burning them. That was humanity. That was their gift to the galaxy. And it was only the beginning.